April 15th, 1951. The sky above the Yalu River was an endless blue canvas streaked with contrails. Oberleutnant Karl Weber gripped the throttle of his MiG-15, the wind rushing past the canopy as if trying to carry him forward before he could blink. He and his wingman banked sharply over the snowy peaks, their breath fogging the cockpit in sync with the faint hum of the jet engine. In the distance, a flash of silver caught his eye, a formation of F-86 Sabres glinting like polished knives against the morning light. Karl laughed under his breath, a short bark of disbelief. "Those? Against us?" he muttered to his wingman, eyes narrowing. The F-86 looked almost delicate, aerodynamic, and gleaming, its nose sleek, wings perfectly swept. Years of Luftwaffe experience made him skeptical. Speed alone, he thought, could not substitute for power, armament, or cunning. Yet, as the Sabres drew closer, slicing through clouds with a confidence that seemed to mock his own machines, a knot of unease formed in his stomach. The radios crackled with static and terse commands, the tonal rhythm of an approaching clash. Karl's co-pilot adjusted his goggles, squinting at the enemy formation, noting the disciplined line and synchronization. "They fly like dancers," he said softly, half in jest, half in awe. And indeed, the Sabres moved not like machines, but like extensions of human intention, quick, elegant, precise. The MiGs, powerful yet bulky, seemed almost ponderous by comparison. Below, the frozen river reflected sunlight in shards, turning the terrain into a glittering battlefield of ice and shadow. Clouds scattered, drifting lazily, providing fleeting cover and revealing the enemy in sudden bursts. Karl's heart raced, not from fear alone, but from anticipation. The first shots, he knew, would decide much more than individual kills. They would set the tone for aerial combat in this new era of jets. He tightened his gloves around the controls, feeling the familiar resistance, the vibration of the engine as it responded to the smallest movements. For a moment, the past felt distant. World War II dogfights, piston engines, the roar of Messerschmitts, all replaced by the screaming jets and razor-sharp reflexes of the jet age. And yet, the old instincts remained, honed over countless sorties. Watch, anticipate, strike. A distant burst of tracer fire lit the horizon, and Karl's laughter died on his lips. The Sabres were already in attack formation, precise, fast, and deadly. The sky seemed smaller now, compressed by speed, and every second stretched impossibly long. His wingman rolled beside him, eyes wide, realizing that underestimating these new machines might cost them everything. In the cockpit, the contrast between hubris and reality was immediate, visceral. Karl's mind raced through maneuvers, tactics, and evasions. He felt the first pangs of respect, tinged with fear, for the sleek American jets that now dominated the skies. The dogfight was about to begin, and no one, veteran or novice, could predict the outcome. The context begins with the unfolding stage of the Korean War, where jet aircraft redefined the battlefield and German pilots confronted the challenge of their lives. The winter of 1950 to 1951 over the Korean peninsula had been merciless, a frozen expanse where mountains and rivers dictated the flow of battle almost as much as the human combatants. For the German pilots serving under UN auspices, this was both familiar and alien. Many were veterans of the Luftwaffe, men whose lives had been forged in the skies over Europe. Yet here they confronted a new world of jet-powered warfare. Their training, discipline, and courage remained intact, but the stakes had shifted dramatically. Bases in Japan and South Korea were hubs of logistical precision. Hangars rattled with the constant drone of engines, while mechanics labored over jet turbines that hissed, whined, and roared with a ferocity the Germans had never known. Pilots like Oberleutnant Karl Weber arrived early each morning to a landscape dominated by hangars, runways slick with frost, and the smell of fuel mingled with the metallic tang of aircraft components. The noise was relentless, maintenance crews shouting instructions, tools clattering, and the distant roar of Sabres testing engines. The operational context was stark. Intelligence reports, declassified in the decades since, show that MiG-15s were concentrated along the Yalu River, providing the North Koreans with a rapid response air force. Against them, the Americans deployed the F-86 Sabre, a jet that combined speed, stability, and heavy firepower in a way previously unseen. Technical schematics indicate the Sabre could reach near Mach speeds in dives, while its 650 caliber machine guns could shred enemy fighters at remarkable range. The Germans, initially skeptical of the aircraft's light frame and aerodynamic elegance, underestimated the combination of velocity and pilot skill that these machines offered. German pilots were briefed extensively on the new theater of operations. Their training emphasized air combat in mountainous terrain, exploiting MiG agility and understanding the limitations of jet engines in cold climates. Letters from pilots at K-14 Air Base describe bitterly cold mornings, engines that struggled to ignite, and the eerie quiet between sorties that heightened anticipation and anxiety. These letters, preserved in military archives, also reveal moments of levity, camaraderie among pilots, bets on who would score first, and the sharing of chocolate and coffee as temporary comforts against the pervasive tension. The human element was as critical as the mechanical. Officers stressed discipline, formation flying, and situational awareness, recognizing that the high speeds of jet combat compressed reaction times. The skies over MiG Alley became classrooms of lethal lessons. The slightest miscalculation could result in a fatal collision or a sudden burst of enemy fire. For many German pilots, this contrasted sharply with their experience in piston-engined fighters, where engagements unfolded more slowly, allowing more time to react. The psychological adjustment was daunting yet exhilarating, as some journals note the strange thrill of near-instantaneous combat. American bases, by contrast, displayed meticulous coordination. Flight schedules, maintenance rotations, and tactical briefings were orchestrated to maximize efficiency and exploit the Sabre's capabilities. Observers later noted that the Germans initially regarded these measures with a mix of amusement and incredulity. To them, the bureaucracy seemed excessive, yet it enabled the Americans to maintain constant air presence over key sectors. Mission reports described the effect of these operations. German pilots could spot Sabres, laugh at their sleek appearance, and still be shot down moments later due to the combination of speed, coordination, and tactical ingenuity. The context of this aerial war is inseparable from technology, geography, and human experience. German pilots flew machines designed in a different era against opponents who had embraced speed and adaptability as central tenets. Snow-draped mountains, frozen rivers, and narrow valleys all became factors in the deadly calculus of survival. Their own training, steeped in European combat, clashed with the unfamiliar rhythm of jet warfare. Above all, the early engagements highlighted a motif that would recur throughout the campaign: the tension between hubris and adaptation. The German pilots' initial laughter at the Sabres, a mixture of disbelief and pride, would be tested repeatedly. Every sortie reinforced the lesson that underestimating an enemy, no matter how elegant, slender, or unfamiliar, could be fatal. These skies were no longer just battlefields. They were arenas where speed dictated outcome and perception shaped reality. As the weeks unfolded, the German pilots' initial skepticism of the F-86 Sabres began to erode. Mission reports, now declassified, show a pattern of early misjudgment. Pilots assumed the lighter frame and sleek design implied fragility or reduced firepower. But the Sabre's pilots, carefully trained and disciplined, exploited speed, altitude, and coordinated tactics in ways the Germans had not anticipated. Letters from Karl Weber describe the dawning realization. We laughed at their small, silver birds. Then we learned that they strike before we even see them. The evolution of aerial tactics became a central element of the campaign. German pilots relied on traditional dogfighting maneuvers perfected during World War II, tight turns, head-on attacks, and vertical loops. Yet the Sabre's superior acceleration and diving capability rendered many of these maneuvers obsolete. Each encounter became a deadly lesson in adaptation. Diaries detail moments of near panic as MiGs attempted maneuvers that were countered instantaneously by the Sabres, their pilots anticipating every turn, every evasive climb. The lesson was stark. In the jet age, speed and initiative dictated survival as much as skill and courage. The bases themselves reflected the logistical backbone of the American operation. Hangars, supply depots, and repair facilities operated like clockwork, enabling rapid sortie cycles. German pilots noted the consistency with which F-86s returned to the air, repaired and refueled in record time. The contrast with the slower MiG maintenance, often complicated by cold weather limitations and logistical shortages, further amplified the tactical advantage of the Americans. Memoirs cite moments of bitter frustration as a MiG was grounded while a Sabre streaked past on its next mission, turning the skies into a testing ground of both skill and mechanical reliability. Propaganda, both internal and external, played a subtle role in shaping perceptions. American newspapers and military bulletins emphasized the prowess of their pilots, often sensationalizing the agility of the Sabres. German pilots, initially dismissive, began to internalize these reports as psychological reinforcement. Letters reveal that the laughter of earlier sorties gave way to careful calculation and even respect for their adversaries. By mid-1951, the joke that had opened their deployment, a joke at the expense of the F-86, had hardened into a serious acknowledgement of the Sabre's deadly efficiency. Training programs evolved in response. German officers adjusted sortie tactics, focusing on energy management, coordinated wing movements, and leveraging altitude to compensate for speed deficits. Pilots learned to read the Sabre's patterns, anticipate evasive maneuvers, and exploit the MiG's strengths. Mission briefings highlighted specific weaknesses, certain attack angles, fuel limitations, and the Sabre's relative vulnerability in tight, low-altitude engagements. These lessons, gleaned from encounters and letters sent home, were vital in the pilot's eventual success. By late 1951, the stage was set for a dramatic reversal of fortunes. German pilots had transformed initial derision into calculated aggression, their skill now magnified by the lessons learned against the Sabres. The first major tally of victories, kills, confirmed by gun camera footage and cross-referenced mission logs, began to accumulate, signaling the shift from underestimation to mastery. Yet the tension remained. every engagement could still prove fatal, and the delicate balance between audacity and recklessness would determine both survival and triumph. This context of snow-laden skies, evolving tactics, and the relentless challenge of speed paved the way for the descent. German pilots would now experience the first shocks of combat, the exhilaration of dogfights, and the dawning understanding that in the jet age, nothing could be taken for granted. May 3, 1951. Early morning over Mig Alley. The sky was pale grey, clouds stretched thin over jagged ridges, a patchwork of shadows and sunlight. Oberleutnant Karl Weber's MiG-15 sliced through the chill, canopy frosting slightly at high altitude. His pulse quickened, not with fear alone, but with the sharp thrill of anticipation. Today, the German pilots would engage Sabres in full combat for the first time, and the echoes of laughter at their delicate opponents were already fading into concentration. The first glimpses of the enemy came as a flash of silver, cutting against a sunlit horizon. Sabres banked with effortless precision, their pilots communicating in clipped, confident English, wings synchronized like dancers. Karl's wingman, Müller, muttered, "They're faster than the briefing said." Karl's jaw tightened. The sleek American jets moved almost preternaturally, anticipating approaches, covering one another, forcing MiGs to react before they could act. Tracers began to lace the sky. The sharp crackle of machine guns filled the air inside the cockpit, punctuated by the metallic tang of gunfire. Karl rolled hard, narrowly avoiding a spray of rounds that shredded a snow-laden ridge below. For a moment, the MiG felt sluggish, cumbersome, a legacy of older dogfighting tactics ill-suited to the instantaneous demands of jet combat. The psychological weight of speed, he realized, was heavier than any physical constraint. The first kills were confusing. German pilots reported MiGs destroyed by weapons they barely saw, their crews left in stunned disbelief. Karl's own diary, recovered decades later, described it with stark simplicity. They appear, fire, vanish. The sky is smaller than our memories told us. Even as adrenaline surged, a dawning respect settled in. The Sabres were not merely fast, they were precise, coordinated, and lethal in ways that demanded adaptation rather than arrogance. The cold altitude sharpened senses. Clouds became obstacles, cover, and threats simultaneously. MiGs maneuvered through the grey patches, attempting vertical climbs and dives to gain advantage. Yet every maneuver was anticipated by a Sabre, its pilot exploiting speed to maintain position. Letters from pilots in Karl's unit later emphasized the mental strain. Each second compressed decisions, each turn became a gamble, and hesitation often meant destruction. On the ground, radar and observer posts relayed the unfolding aerial chaos. Base crews followed the sorties with a mixture of pride and concern, noting the extraordinary skill and bravery required. Mission reports cross-referenced gun camera footage with pilot logs confirming the first engagements were not just tests of aircraft, but of human endurance and tactical ingenuity. For the Germans, the initial laughter at the F-86s had evaporated, replaced by a tense awareness that every sortie could reshape their perception of survival. In one instance, Karl's wingman Müller executed a steep climb to escape a pursuing Sabre, only to find himself caught by another jet from the opposite flank. The MiG shuddered as rounds impacted near the tail section, forcing an evasive roll into a cloud. The sky, once as a theater of straightforward maneuvers, had transformed into a fluid, unpredictable space where speed and anticipation dominated. By mid-morning, the intensity of the descent into combat became undeniable. German pilots' initial bravado, their laughter and dismissive glances, had given way to a mixture of awe, respect, and raw survival instinct. Each encounter reinforced the motif that would define the campaign: pride confronted by adaptation, and adaptation measured by the ability to master speed. The terrain below, the frozen river valleys and jagged ridges, offered no respite. Each dogfight left trails of smoke and traces, disrupting the visual field and heightening tension. The MiGs, though maneuverable, were forced into reactive patterns, learning in real time the deadly elegance of the F-86. Even the most confident pilots recorded moments of near panic, acknowledging in diaries that this was not European air combat, not the measured duels of the past. It was instantaneous, unforgiving, and absolute. By May 5, 1951, the German pilots had fully felt the unforgiving rhythm of jet warfare. Each sortie revealed the true nature of the F-86 Sabres, fast, precise, and coordinated with a professionalism that left little room for error. Oberleutnant Karl Weber, once amused by their appearance, now experienced the biting reality that speed and anticipation could determine life or death in a fraction of a second. The motif of pride versus adaptation had moved from theory to visceral truth. The dogfights escalated in intensity. MiGs executed rolls, vertical climbs, and split-S maneuvers, attempting to exploit their own strengths. But the Sabres anticipated and countered with almost uncanny precision. Karl's diary noted, "We dive, they dive, we turn, they turn. It is not chance, but their speed that governs the sky." Gun camera footage, later declassified, shows tracers weaving through clouds, jets spiraling in rapid choreography, and moments where even veteran pilots could barely track the enemy. Fatigue and adrenaline mingled, shaping both decisions and reflexes. Pilots reported gripping controls so tightly that their hands ached, eyes straining to follow the lightning-fast movements of metal and fire. Letters sent home emphasized the exhilaration and terror. One moment you are above, the next you are running to survive. The skies had become a theater of constant adaptation, where hesitation was punished instantly and innovation rewarded those who dared to anticipate faster than their opponent. Mid-May brought the first confirmed victories for the German pilots. Against the very jets they had once mocked, they had begun to claim kills. Karl's own log notes a mixture of astonishment and pride. "We laughed at them. Now we fight them, and some fall." These engagements reinforced a hard-earned lesson. Underestimation was fatal, but respect combined with skill could turn apparent disadvantage into opportunity. The Sabres were formidable, but not invincible. Understanding their strengths and anticipating their maneuvers allowed the Germans to reclaim agency in the skies. Base life continued to play a subtle but critical role. Between sorties, pilots repaired, refueled, and planned new tactics. Briefings grew longer, more meticulous, and more strategic, emphasizing altitude management, formation coordination, and energy conservation. Personal diaries reveal that humor and camaraderie persisted despite danger. Jokes about silver darts and wagers on who would survive a sortie offered relief amid tension. Even small acts, a shared cigarette, a letter home, or a careful inspection of aircraft, grounded the pilots, reminding them that they were human amid the mechanized fury of war. By the end of May, the German pilots' adaptation was unmistakable. Their laughter at the Sabres had transformed into focused respect. Their pride, tempered by survival, now fueled a deadly efficiency. The motif of flight as a duel between hubris and adaptation reached full clarity. Success in the air no longer depended on legacy, reputation, or bravado. It depended on anticipation, skill, and the willingness to learn instantly from every maneuver, every turn, every burst of enemy fire. The stage was set for routine to emerge amid this high-octane environment. Pilots began to recognize patterns, establish mental and tactical rhythms, and integrate lessons into daily practice. The next chapter will explore the routine, the blend of preparation, camaraderie, and psychological endurance that underpinned these deadly encounters and defined life at forward air bases. June 1st, 1951, K-14 Air Base, South Korea. The sun rose over a tangle of hangars, frost melting into puddles across the tarmac. For German pilots like Oberleutnant Karl Weber, the rhythm of life on base was a contrast to the chaos of MiG Alley. Engines purred in the distance, mechanics shouted over the din, and the smell of jet fuel mingled with the crisp morning air. The high-speed dogfights of the previous weeks still echoed in their memories, but the cadence of routine grounded them, offering a fragile sense of control. Pre-flight checks became ritualistic. Every lever, dial, and gauge was inspected with meticulous precision. Movements repeated until muscle memory could predict the aircraft's responses even under duress. Letters home described these mornings with almost meditative detail: tightening of screws, verification of hydraulic lines, a final visual sweep over the sleek fuselage of the MiG. There was pride in the mechanic's work, respect for the machines, and a quiet camaraderie that grew from shared responsibility and the recognition that each small step could mean life or death in the skies. Breakfast in the mess hall was noisy but controlled. The pilots joked, laughed, and sometimes argued over small grievances, all under the watchful eye of the squadron commander. Coffee steamed in thick mugs, eggs and rice warmed their bodies against the lingering morning chill. Even in these mundane moments, there was a shared acknowledgement of danger. Conversation often drifted to strategy, analyzing the Sabres' movements, debating who had the best chance in upcoming sorties, or recounting near misses from the previous day. These exchanges were simultaneously therapeutic and tactical, a way to process fear and reinforce cohesion. Physical conditioning remained vital. The thin, cold air of early morning demanded stamina and endurance. Pilots ran along frost-lined tracks, stretched rigorously, and practiced emergency ejections repeatedly, instilling reflexes that might save them in the heat of combat. Memoirs preserved in post-war archives describe the strange duality of these exercises. The monotony of repetition contrasted with the intensity of knowing that one day these very muscles and reflexes would determine survival in a sky filled with silver streaks of Sabres. Maintenance crews moved with quiet efficiency, their routines forming the backbone of daily life. Engines were inspected, oil replaced, turbines tested, and landing gear checked for stress damage. Pilots observed or assisted when necessary, learning the nuances of their aircraft. Letters describe this as both educational and humbling. Even veterans of World War II discovered that mastery of the MiG required constant vigilance, attention to detail, and respect for the machine's limits. As the day progressed, briefings prepared pilots for potential engagements. Maps were spread on tables, markers and notations indicating likely Sabre positions, optimal altitudes, and potential ambush points. Intelligence reports from radar and reconnaissance flights were integrated, creating a mental picture that each pilot would carry into the air. The combination of preparation and anticipation became a ritualized cycle, embedding the lessons of the descent into daily life. Despite the monotony, moments of levity punctuated the routine. Pilots played cards, recounted stories of absurdly close encounters, or joked about the silver darts that haunted their skies. Even small gestures, sharing chocolate, repairing a friend's flight jacket, or assisting a mechanic, strengthened the bonds that would be tested in the high-velocity dogfights ahead. These human details, often overlooked in broader historical accounts, formed the invisible scaffold supporting skill, morale, and survival. By mid-June 1951, the rhythm of life at K-14 Air Base had crystallized into a cycle both predictable and tense. Pilots rose before dawn, conducted pre-flight drills, briefed on potential engagements, and then waited, sometimes hours, sometimes days, for orders that would send them into the skies above Mig Alley. Each day reinforced the delicate balance between preparation and improvisation. Even with routine, nothing was certain. The Sabres could appear at any moment, turning careful planning into a desperate exercise in adaptation. Flights were now executed with a practiced precision that masked the danger beneath. Pilots coordinated formations, monitored fuel and engine temperatures, and constantly scanned the horizon for the telltale glint of enemy metal. Diaries describe these sorties in almost cinematic detail, the sun catching the F-86's wings, tracer fire streaking through clouds, and the tight choreography of evasive maneuvers. These missions, while repetitive in structure, were unpredictably lethal, and the lessons of each engagement were absorbed, dissected, and applied to the next sortie. Life on base carried quieter challenges as well. Rest was fragmented and often stolen between briefings and flight prep. Meals were functional rather than leisurely. Medical officers monitored stress and fatigue, recognizing that the psychological strain of high-speed aerial combat could be as dangerous as the enemy itself. Letters home from Carl Weber reveal both longing and discipline, a yearning for normalcy, alongside an awareness that mastery of the MiG demanded constant vigilance. Routine extended to personal maintenance and camaraderie. Pilots repaired gear, polished cockpits, and reviewed mission footage. Small competitions emerged. Who could complete pre-flight checks fastest without errors? Who could recall Sabre capabilities in greatest detail? Who could predict enemy tactics with the highest accuracy? Humor remained a vital counterbalance to fear. Jokes about silver jets, improbable escapes, and absurd mishaps circulated in the mess hall, reinforcing bonds and allowing the mind a brief respite from the tension above the clouds. Weather became another adversary. Fog, rain, and sudden snow showers could cancel missions or force risky adjustments mid-flight. Pilots adapted, learning to read cloud formations, anticipate wind shifts, and use terrain to their advantage. Letters recount exhilaration as they cut through sudden breaks in cloud cover, glimpsing enemy formations at impossible distances, or relief when a storm forced an unexpected pause. Even in repetition, the skies demanded constant attention, rewarding awareness and punishing error. By late June, the German pilots had internalized both the discipline and the thrill of the jet-age routine. The combination of preparation, coordination, and psychological endurance created an almost meditative state. Each pilot moved through the day with muscle memory and reflexive anticipation, a state honed in training but tested in the skies. Their laughter at the F-86 had long faded, replaced by focused respect, tactical creativity, and a growing confidence in their own skills. Yet beneath the calm rhythm of daily life, tension simmered. The pilots knew that mastery was never complete, that every sortie carried risk, and that the next engagement could challenge everything they had learned. The turning point, when experience and adaptation would be tested to the fullest, loomed just beyond the horizon, an inevitable collision of skill, speed, and fate. This pattern of preparation, endurance, and subtle psychological warfare set the stage for the turning point, where German pilots would confront the Sabres not just with skill, but with strategy, reshaping both their confidence and the course of their aerial campaigns. July 14th, 1951. The skies over Mig Alley were a canvas of pale grey, broken only by streaks of white contrails and the glinting metal of approaching aircraft. Oberleutnant Karl Weber checked his instruments, noting altitude, fuel levels, and the positions of his wingmen. Today was not a routine sortie. Intelligence had flagged a large formation of F-86 Sabres moving to intercept. The air was thick with anticipation, a tangible tension that clung to every cockpit. As the German pilots climbed to intercept, the first flashes of silver appeared along the horizon. Karl's laughter from weeks prior was long gone. Now, his focus was absolute. The Sabres moved with a speed and cohesion that demanded split-second decisions. Each maneuver, each adjustment of throttle or angle carried the weight of potential life or death. Mission reports later revealed that these were some of the most complex engagements of the summer, with pilots forced to integrate every lesson learned from weeks of prior sorties. Tracers laced the sky, sunlight glinting off wing edges, while the MiGs and Sabres engaged in a deadly ballet. Karl executed a vertical dive to gain speed, narrowly avoiding a stream of bullets that shredded clouds nearby. His wingman, Müller, engaged a Sabre, attempting a flanking maneuver, relying on coordination and the precise timing of evasive rolls. The engagements were no longer about raw power alone. They were about anticipation, adaptation, and exploiting small openings with surgical precision. The first confirmed kill of the day came with a sudden flash. A Sabre's wingman misjudged a turn, and Müller's MiG fired a calculated burst, sending the jet spinning away. Karl noted the mix of triumph and tension that accompanied such victories. The exhilaration of success was always tempered by the awareness that each dogfight demanded constant vigilance. Every maneuver could expose them to counterattack. Diaries later captured the emotional complexity of these moments: relief, pride, and the sobering reality of death hovering just beyond reach. Tactically, the Germans began to exploit new insights. They learned to use altitude, cloud cover, and the MiG's superior climb rate to offset the Sabre's speed advantage. Formation strategies evolved, with wingmen covering each other's blind spots and split-group tactics forcing Sabres into reactive positions. Mission analyses reveal that these adaptations were instrumental in the summer tally of kills, allowing German pilots to turn initial vulnerability into calculated advantage. Psychologically, the turning point was profound. The initial derision of the Sabres had been replaced by a disciplined respect. Laughter gave way to a focused intensity. Letters sent home capture this transformation. We no longer mock them. We study, anticipate, and strike. Each flight is a lesson. Each engagement, a test of skill against speed itself. The motif of pride, tempered by adaptation, became fully realized, linking every tactical maneuver to personal growth and survival. The air was alive with the tension of rapid decision-making. Sabres sliced through clouds, attempting to outmaneuver the German formation, while Karl and his comrades responded with precision, anticipating attacks and countering with bursts of their own fire. The mixture of fear and exhilaration created a heightened state of awareness, where instinct and training merged seamlessly. Mission logs describe these moments as the apex of learning and execution. The German pilots had begun to master not only the MiG, but also the dynamics of high-speed jet combat against formidable opponents. Every engagement reinforced a new truth. Skill alone was insufficient without adaptation. The turning point was not a single moment of victory, but a gradual shift, an awakening to the demands of the jet age. Pilots learned to balance aggression with caution, leverage their aircraft's strengths, and exploit every small opening. The sky, once a theater of chaos, became a testing ground for intellect and reflex, courage and calculation. By late July 1951, the German pilots had fully integrated the lessons of MiG Alley into their reflexes. Each sortie reinforced the delicate balance between aggression and caution, speed and precision. Karl Weber's diary reflects this evolution. We no longer rush blindly. Every turn, every climb, every dive is measured. The Sabres teach us even as we strike them down. The laughter of derision had vanished completely, replaced by a disciplined respect that shaped both strategy and execution. The air battles of this period were increasingly decisive. German pilots leveraged the MiG's superior climb rate and maneuverability to force Sabres into reactive patterns, turning initial disadvantages into opportunities for calculated attacks. Tracers arced through clouds, gunfire sang over icy riverbeds, and smoke trails marked both victories and narrowly avoided losses. Mission reports confirm the emergence of a new German doctrine. Precision strikes, rapid altitude changes, and wingman coordination became central to survival and success. Psychological transformation was as crucial as tactical adaptation. The pilot's pride had evolved into a measured confidence, grounded in skill, experience, and the acute understanding of their enemy. Letters and personal notes from the era show a blend of exhilaration and solemnity. Each confirmed kill carried not only triumph, but the weight of responsibility, the knowledge that speed and skill alone could never eliminate the dangers of a jet battlefield. By early August, Karl and his comrades were tallying victories at unprecedented rates. The initial shock of the F-86 had been replaced by mastery, and the motif of flight as a duel between hubris and adaptation reached its zenith. The German pilots' understanding of both their own limits and the Sabre's capabilities allowed them to exploit openings, anticipate maneuvers, and survive situations that would have been fatal in earlier weeks. Even as aerial encounters became more lethal, the pilots' methodical approach, forged through experience, offered a sense of control amidst the chaos. This period also revealed the human cost of adaptation. Pilots faced exhaustion, strain, and occasional loss, each incident reinforcing the fragile boundary between skill and fate. Journals describe sleepless nights, the mental calculus of whether to engage or evade, and the fleeting relief of safe return to base. Humor, camaraderie, and ritualized routines continued to serve as lifelines, allowing the pilots to process trauma, maintain focus, and preserve morale. The turning point was completed when the German pilots began to dominate localized engagements against the Sabres, racking up confirmed kills while minimizing losses. The motif of adaptation in the face of hubris now defined their approach. Respect, tempered by experience, strategy, guided by observation, and pride, moderated by survival instincts. What had begun as laughter at perceived weakness had matured into disciplined effectiveness, a transformation evident in both the sky and the pilot's reflections on it. As the tempo of combat increased, the campaigns reached a critical juncture. Pilots faced extended sorties, heightened risk, and the need for ever faster decision-making. Their mastery of adaptation would soon be tested to the fullest in sequences that demanded split-second reactions and flawless execution. The collapse, escape, and liberation of this narrative, the apex of aerial tension and confrontation, loomed just beyond the next horizon, promising the climax of both skill and human endurance. August 22, 1951, MiG Alley, over the snow-streaked ridges along the Yalu River. The morning light struck the clouds at sharp angles, illuminating a battlefield of contrails that streaked the sky like fractured ribbons of white. Oberleutnant Karl Weber climbed steadily, scanning the horizon. Today, intelligence predicted an unusually large formation of F-86 Sabres patrolling a critical air corridor. The German pilots' nerves were taut, their previous victories a tenuous confidence dangling over a dangerous reality. The first flashes of the enemy appeared almost silently against the grey expanse. A squadron of Sabres cut through the clouds with uncanny precision, their formation tight, wings gleaming, each maneuver executed with lethal coordination. Karl's hand tightened around the throttle, eyes narrowing. The MiGs, though agile, now felt the full pressure of numerical disadvantage and overwhelming speed. Tracers laced the sky instantly, forcing immediate evasive maneuvers. Every second demanded perfect anticipation. Hesitation could mean destruction. Chaos erupted as the two forces collided. MiGs rolled, climbed, and dived, attempting to outmaneuver the faster Sabres. Yet the Americans exploited altitude, speed, and coordinated firepower with devastating effect. Karl's wingman, Müller, was forced into a sudden vertical dive to escape a barrage, narrowly avoiding a stream of machine gun fire that shredded clouds nearby. Smoke trailed from aircraft on both sides, a visceral reminder of the lethal calculus in play. The collapse was both literal and psychological. German pilots had reached the limits of endurance, their reflexes tested to the edge of human capacity. Fuel lines, engine heat, and oxygen constraints compounded the terror of the engagement. Diaries recount moments of tunnel vision. Clouds blurred, contrails intersected, and every second stretched into an eternity where survival hinged on instinct, honed through weeks of adaptation. The sky itself became a crucible, compressing distance, time, and consequence into a relentless test of skill. Amid the chaos, Karl executed a risky maneuver, an evasive roll into a cloud bank, climbing sharply to regain position. Behind him, Müller covered his flank, each decision coordinated, instinctive, yet perilously thin margins separated success from catastrophe. Reports later confirm that small pockets of MiGs used altitude advantage and momentary cloud cover to escape concentrated fire, temporary liberation from imminent death. These escapes, though minor in scale, underscored a central truth. Survival depended not just on speed, but on anticipation, coordination, and a willingness to seize fleeting opportunity. The aerial ballet unfolded with relentless energy. Sabres pursued with precision, firing in sweeping arcs. MiGs countered with sudden climbs, dives, and synchronized rolls. Gun camera footage, later declassified, shows traces intersecting like threads of silver, clouds torn apart by bursts of flame, and moments where pilots narrowly missed one another by meters. The collapse tested every lesson learned during previous engagements, demanding mastery of both machine and mind under unprecedented pressure. By midday, attrition and fatigue forced both sides to disengage. German pilots who survived the sortie reflected on the terrifying intensity. The sky had compressed into a theater where only adaptation, anticipation, and nerve ensured survival. Letters sent home from Karl describe both exhilaration and dread. The exhilaration of skill applied perfectly tempered by the stark awareness of mortality. The motif of pride and adaptation reached a crucial resolution. What began as underestimation had evolved through skill, repetition, and tactical innovation into a measured mastery tested by the most extreme conditions. Yet even at the peak of this trial, the lessons were far from over. The final phase, the consolidation, escape, and enduring reflection of what had been endured would soon arrive, bringing closure and human perspective to a campaign defined by speed, skill, and survival. By late August, the skies over Mig Alley had become both adversary and classroom. Karl Weber and his comrades had survived multiple high-intensity sorties, each leaving scars on the mind even when the body remained intact. The collapse had tested endurance, reflexes, and the limits of human composure. Each engagement reinforced that mastery of the MiG and understanding of the Sabre's patterns were inseparable from survival. During one particularly fierce sortie, Karl found himself separated from his wingman as a formation of Sabres bore down from above. The mixture of fear and calculated focus sharpened his senses. He executed a sudden vertical climb, then rolled into a steep dive, exploiting cloud cover to mask his approach. Tracers streaked past, smoke spiraled from nearby aircraft, and for a moment, time seemed suspended. Survival depended on instinct, honed by weeks of adaptation, and Karl's decision-making in those seconds exemplified the hard-won skill that defined the German pilot's transformation. Escape was never guaranteed. MiGs pushed to their operational limits, and each evasive maneuver risked engine strain, loss of control, or fuel depletion. Yet small successes, temporary exits from enemy fire, reaching higher altitude, or regaining formation cohesion offered glimpses of liberation. Pilots relied on coordinated strategies, altitude advantages, and brief windows of opportunity to navigate the treacherous ballet of attack and counterattack. Letters describe the exhilaration of returning to base intact, a mixture of relief, pride, and exhaustion, settling over men who had faced both mechanical and human challenges in the most extreme conditions. Back at base, the debriefing was rigorous. Every sortie was analyzed, mistakes dissected, and successful maneuvers celebrated quietly. Karl and his comrades documented engagement patterns, traced enemy behaviors, and refined tactics for future encounters. The collapse had revealed vulnerabilities, the escape had honed judgment, and liberation, both from immediate danger and from fear itself, had crystallized the pilot's mastery of jet-age combat. The skies were still dangerous, but now they were navigable, mapped in both thought and reflex. The motif of pride, tempered by adaptation, reached its narrative zenith. German pilots who had laughed at the Sabres now commanded respect for both their adversaries and themselves. Letters home captured the paradox. Exhilaration intertwined with the sobering reality of risk, humor interlaced with reverence, and a profound understanding that survival in the jet age demanded constant learning. The collapse tested their limits, the escape validated their skill, and liberation offered not only respite, but the affirmation that mastery was possible even against superior speed. The culmination of these experiences set the stage for reflection. The human cost, the lessons of speed and adaptation, and the psychological transformation of veteran pilots would now find resonance in the aftermath. The story would slow, letting the echoes of the dogfights fade, while the enduring impact of courage, skill, and adaptation settled into lasting memory. September 3rd, 1951. K-14 Airbase. The morning was quiet, the kind of stillness that felt almost unnatural after months of relentless aerial combat. Oberleutnant Karl Weber walked along the tarmac, the MiGs lined up like silent sentinels, their sleek bodies glinting in the weak sunlight. Engines sat cold, hangars hushed, and the cacophony of gunfire, tracers, and screaming turbines was replaced by the soft hum of wind over metal. The pilots, their adrenaline spent, moved with a subdued rhythm, each step a reminder that the skies they had mastered were now behind them, if only temporarily. Debriefings had ended, repairs were completed, and flight logs meticulously filed. The tension of constant vigilance that had dominated their lives was replaced by a contemplative silence. Diaries reveal the contrast: exhilaration of dogfights, terror of near misses, and finally, a measured reflection on what had been endured. The motif of pride tempered by adaptation lingered, not just as a tactical reality, but as a human lesson, imprinted deeply on the psyche. Karl paused near a hangar, watching younger pilots check instruments and secure panels. The meticulous care they exhibited echoed the discipline he and his comrades had developed under fire. Letters preserved in military archives describe how these moments, the quiet, routine, and observation, became opportunities for reflection, recognition of growth, acknowledgement of comrades lost, and the weight of responsibility carried even in victory. Humor, once a fleeting respite during sorties, now manifested in small exchanges, sharing coffee, recounting absurd close calls, or joking about the predictability of weather in Korea. The emotional landscape was complex. Pilots processed fear, relief, and pride simultaneously. Mission logs and personal letters indicate a heightened awareness of mortality, an understanding of limits, and the subtle joy of having survived encounters that seemed impossible just months earlier. Observers later noted that veterans like Karl carried themselves with a quiet confidence, tempered by experience and the enduring knowledge that adaptation had been both their shield and their tool. Medical evaluations and psychological assessments at the base confirmed the strain endured. Sleep was fragmented. Fatigue lingered in muscles and nerves. Yet the pilot's skills remained sharp. Their mastery of aircraft, situational awareness, and tactical reasoning had been honed to a level rarely documented outside of formal studies. Karl's journal described the paradox. Even as he longed for rest, the skies continued to call in memory, the rush of flight leaving a lingering imprint on perception and thought. This period of reflection extended beyond individual experience. Briefings, post-mission analyses, and cross-unit discussions created a collective memory of the campaign. Pilots shared insights, recounted moments of ingenuity, and reinforced the lessons learned in the crucible of MiG Alley. The motif of adaptation, first a survival mechanism, later a source of pride, became a lens through which every maneuver, every engagement, and every narrow escape was interpreted. The human element remained central. Encounters with the Sabres, the rigorous routines of base life, and the relentless demands of combat had transformed each pilot. Letters to family describe not only the technical mastery acquired, but also the deeper understanding of vulnerability, trust, and the bonds forged in life or death situations. Even as engines cooled and skies cleared, the lessons of speed, anticipation, and respect lingered. By mid-September 1951, a slow rhythm had settled over K-14 Air Base. The MiGs were lined neatly in the hangars, their polished surfaces reflecting the pale autumn sunlight. Pilots moved deliberately between aircraft, checking panels, wiping cockpits, and running through systems as if the past months of constant engagement had left a permanent imprint on both body and mind. Carl Weber, walking among them, felt the weight of experience pressing alongside the faint thrill of memory, the rush of maneuvers, the arc of tracer fire, the instantaneous decisions that had once dictated life and death. The psychological aftershocks were evident. Diaries and letters captured a spectrum of emotions: relief at surviving, pride in skill mastered, and solemn reflection on comrades lost or wounded. Even small moments, a laugh over a minor error, the sharing of a cigarette, or the casual exchange of a joke, held layers of significance, a reminder that humanity persisted amid the machinery of war. Every ritual, from pre-flight checks to briefing room discussions, was now tinged with the knowledge that they had endured, adapted, and prevailed against an opponent that had first seemed insurmountable. The debriefings evolved from tactical review into philosophical reflection. Officers analyzed engagements, not only for combat effectiveness, but for the lessons of anticipation, patience, and humility under pressure. The motif of pride tempered by adaptation resonated through these sessions. Pilots recognized the transformation from laughter at the F-86 Sabres to measured respect, from naive underestimation to disciplined mastery. Mission footage was reviewed, maneuvers dissected, and decisions pondered, not with fear, but with a desire to understand and improve, a human curiosity sharpened by extreme circumstances. Medical teams and psychologists documented both resilience and fatigue. Stress, though present, had been tempered by the structure of routine and the shared experience of camaraderie. Letters reveal that sleep, once elusive, now offered genuine recovery, and even mundane tasks, cleaning boots, organizing equipment, walking the hangar, provided subtle grounding. The German pilot's transformation was evident not just in skill, but in demeanor. Confidence rooted in knowledge, tempered by reflection, and colored by the intimate awareness of mortality. Carl's final letters from the base capture the lingering motif. We once laughed at what we did not understand. Now we respect it. Each flight was a teacher, each maneuver a test, each enemy a mirror. In the sky, we learned who we were and who we could become. The aftermath was not merely the end of engagements, but the crystallization of skill, discipline, and psychological evolution. Every action, from routine checks to combat sorties, had contributed to a profound understanding of both aircraft and self. The skies were no longer arenas of uncertainty, but repositories of lessons etched in reflex and memory. The MiGs, once instruments of trial, had become extensions of the pilots themselves, embodying the harmony of speed, anticipation, and adaptation. Each pilot had emerged changed, tempered by fire, flight, and the unyielding pressure of encounters that demanded instantaneous mastery. The final reflections of Carl and his comrades reveal that victory was measured not only in kills or tactical success, but in the transformation of human perception under extreme conditions. As the base settled into a quieter routine, the echoes of combat began to fade, leaving room for contemplation and remembrance. The motif of pride, confronted by adaptation, woven through laughter, fear, skill, and survival, remained indelible. The story of the German pilot's journey from derision to mastery finds closure here, in reflection, in the calm after the storm, and in the enduring human capacity to adapt, learn, and prevail. If this story moved you, subscribe to POW Tales, where every silence of war finds its voice again.